All right. So a while back, Gary asked me, "Hey, what if we do a Bitblockboom Spaces? Every Monday night we'll get on. We'll bring somebody up as a guest, and talk some Bitcoin. I can talk Bitcoin all day long." And I met the next speaker a couple years ago. It feels like, but she's one of the co-hosts with Gary and I every Monday night. So if anybody uh, is looking for something to do on a Monday night, listen or talk about some Bitcoin, come join us on Bitblockboom Spaces. We start at 7:30 Eastern. And so I'm just going to go straight away and introduce my new good friend, Lynne B, who's going to teach us something about Bitcoin. Come on up, Lynne. Let's give her a hand, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, mic working? Great. So thank you so much to Gary for inviting me to speak today. I'm really excited. It's my first time speaking at a Bitcoin conference. So be patient with me, give me a little love. Throughout the day, we've been talking a lot about different aspects of Bitcoin, primarily relative to, ooh, I had a clicker, but excuse me. Can I get the slide advancer? I don't have it. Thanks. So, anyway, we've been talking a lot about Bitcoin primarily as a digital asset, the price of it, how it interacts with financial systems, what we need to be careful about. And in the last couple of months, there's been discussion about, is Bitcoin property or is it a currency? And what are the benefits of presenting it as either of those? And what are the ramifications of it? But I'm going to talk to you today about a little different twist on Bitcoin, and it's as a financial technology. So I really want to dig deep into the tech of Bitcoin, and I really want to shout out the builders who are building on Bitcoin to create the usability and the functionality and the progression of Bitcoin as a financial technology. So, a little bit, just a slight detour. Why am I here? Why do I care about Bitcoin as a technology? And what gives me the background to be able to talk about this? So, just a quick detour, a little bit about my background. I have a unique skill set. I started with an econ degree that I graduated from university at 19. I went to work for Merrill Lynch at 20, and I spent pretty much the next 9 or 10 years working in TradFi on Wall Street. I became a vice president of Merrill Lynch at 25. I moved to New York and was actually working in the depth of the canyon. And by the time I was 29, I became a person that personally I would never want to be friends with. I was entitled, obnoxious, rude, and I had taken off the ethos of TradFi in those days. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I quit and I moved to Mexico in order to reevaluate who I was as a person and what I wanted to do next with my life. I'm still in Mexico, so I'm not sure exactly what that means. But the background over the next several years in Mexico, I started a couple of businesses, and the information that that gave me was how to operate in an emerging financial economy and the unique challenges that that provided. I experienced shortly after arriving a 50% devaluation in the amount of money that I had transferred into my Mexico bank account. I experienced charges of 35% in fees to transfer money to an employee of mine who had a family emergency, and how expensive it is to operate if you don't have a bank account. And I personally stood in line for 2 hours to pay a bill that never arrived in the mail, but I knew it had to be paid or my water would get cut off. So there are unique challenges in operating in a financial system outside of the US or outside what we're all familiar with. So I learned that. I love Mexico, but there are problems that I thought could be solved with different technologies. So fast forward in 2011, I got the idea. I saw what was happening in Silicon Valley. I've always loved tech because tech enabled me to live a life outside of the US in Mexico with greater conveniences and the ability to do more using technology, internet based technologies, and all the evolution of those. And around 2011, I noticed that there was this startup ecosystem that was really emerging in Silicon Valley. It was easy to fund companies. It was easier and less expensive to start companies. And I looked at the Mexico ecosystem and Mexico demographics, and I thought, wow, there are a lot of problems to be solved. There's no one supporting these startup founders. So I started a venture fund, Me to Ventures, in 2014. So 2011, I started exploring the idea. I started a conference called the Meet to Tech Talks to explore cross-border and emerging technologies. And then by 2014, I launched the first fund. During this time, 2012, I was interviewing a speaker for the Meet to Tech Talks, Shak Khan. And Shak was an early investor in Spotify. And I said, you're going to talk about Spotify, right? And he said, no, actually, I'm launching a new digital news site called CoinDesk to talk about Bitcoin. Have you heard of it? And I said, no, I haven't. Can you tell me about it? So he told me about Bitcoin. The price was around $12 at the time we were talking. By the time I could figure out how to buy it, I wasn't one of those who said, oh, I need to think about it. It's not going to work. It's like I was really excited about Bitcoin. So I bought it in early 2013 at 120. And by the time we had the conference in the fall, it was $1,000. So Bitcoin was, to me, an exciting technology. I looked at it as the missing link in internet to enable individuals to transfer individual to individual, bypassing the financial systems that were such a roadblock in traditional internet transactions and commerce, especially if you lived outside of the US or you didn't have a credit card. So that's how I viewed Bitcoin. I viewed it as a financial technology. So let's take a look at some perspective. So, in the early days when Bitcoin launched, it was solving that problem to allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial intermediary. It was the movement of value immediately at almost zero cost with full finality. So, what happened is as we progress, we look at where we are today, and we're really at a point where I think adoption is one of the key focal points. We're looking at the ETF launch that's bringing in institutions. We're looking at the emergence of more and better utilities for education, for onboarding, easier wallets to use. But we're still a little clunky if we're honest with ourselves. I mean, we still have, I think, better tools that we need to develop in order to make it so easy to onboard somebody and to explain to them or to transact. And this changes in different parts of the world too. So that's where we are today. When we look at where we're going, I'm going to spend some time on that in the next slide. But I want you to just open up your imagination for all the things that Bitcoin can enable. So, with the landscape of Bitcoin innovation, it takes startups. Startups need capital to fund. They also need kind of a roadmap, business development. They need expertise in how to navigate, how to set up their systems, where they set up their corporation, how they incorporate, if they have stock options, if they have how they hire employees, how they hire developers that understand the technologies. There are a lot of elements that go into starting a company. And this slide, I want to thank Trammell Venture Partners. On Wednesday, they released their 2023 report on the ecosystem. So if you haven't seen it, if you go to the Trammell Venture Partner website, you can download a copy of it, and I encourage you to take a look at it. But the bottom line is that for a Bitcoin company, for a startup in Bitcoin technologies, there is still a gross misallocation of capital when you compare it to crypto or tokenized systems or even traditional tech. So we need to change that. And that's what I hope to do today is to inspire people to think about supporting both the startups that are building on the Bitcoin ecosystem and the investors that are supporting these startups. Because it takes an unusual mindset in order to do this. So there's a lot of different, I mean, sometimes we tend to think of what is a Bitcoin company? And we have a lot of them right here. Our sponsors, Swan, Financial Exchange, Financial Education. We have Ocean Mining, also a startup and a tech company. We have Bitcoin trading cards, which is consumer goods. And so they're a startup and they're involved in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So there's everything from gaming to social apps. Nostr, I kind of throw in the mix too, because they utilize often payments and Zaps and Lightning Network in order to facilitate transactions on it. And it is a decentralized marketplace. So, merchant payment processing, podcasting apps. I was in the Noster sessions yesterday, and all the tools that are coming out for creators in order to connect directly with your audience. These are all kind of based on the core Bitcoin technology of private keys, public keys, owning your own information, decentralization, eliminating that gatekeeper, that middleman in a tech stack. So I get very excited about that. So here's where I want to spend a little bit of time, and I want everyone to think about this and really open up your mind because I spend a lot of time thinking about what the world can look like, and not just on a Bitcoin standard where we're all using it as our financial foundation, but what kinds of things can this technology enable? And one of the biggest ideas I think is micropayments. So when you think about micropayments, we've never been able to have that before because if you make a tiny payment, then it costs money to process it. You have to go through a middleman. You usually have to have a credit card or something like that. But if you just want to, and I think anyone, I'm sure a lot, how many of you are on Noster and have zapped? A lot of people. So, that's the concept. But for me, it's like I listen to Tipenzi almost every day. I love her music. I think she's awesome. And I would much rather have a system set up where every time I listen to a Tipenzi music, it gives her zaps or it gives her a micropayment instead of me paying 12.99 or whatever it is for Spotify. So I don't listen to everything on Spotify, but I listen to Tipenzi on Spotify, and I'm sure she doesn't get what larger entities get. Netflix, um, Dropbox, uh, any think of any of those subscriptions. I mean, if you go through your monthly credit card bill, have you ever done that? And you see how many monthly subscriptions you have, and how often do you use all those? You want them because you want to know that if you turn on Netflix, that you don't have to go through the whole rigmarole of signing up again. But just imagine a world where micropayments allowed you to pay only for what you consumed. New York Times, Washington Post, LA, I mean, whatever the mainstream newspapers are. What if you only paid for the articles that you read on any platform? I mean, just imagine this whole world of micropayments where, you are paying for the value that you like. You don't have to pay the company, you don't have to pay, you're paying the creators directly. I think it's a really exciting world. I think it changes the dynamic of everything and it incentivizes creators to provide more value, whether you're in music, news, entertainment, sports, they get paid the benefits for those who consume the content. So I love that idea. And then you take it one step further, and there's so much being talked about with AI today. And if you've listened to Guy Swan has an awesome podcast called AI Unchained. And if you haven't listened to it, it's really worth giving a look to it. And one of the early episodes is with Cody Law. Cody's with Fetty, but yet he has this fantastic idea and has done even hackathons with how AI agents in the future will be able to be given an allowance of sats, and then you send them out to create whatever to get whatever tasks you need done. So I don't know how many of you are on chat GPT and you're paying 20 bucks a month for it, and there's a lot of now LLM that are open source that you don't have to pay, but there's so much development being gone on in that matter. But sats are the native currency of the internet. Sats are immediate finality in payments, which is a big problem even with credit cards. A lot of these AI companies are having enormous issues. First of all, it costs a lot on the server space to generate all of that compute power. No one talks about that, burning the oceans like they do with Bitcoin, but that's another story. Anyway, so the AI is using all this compute power. They get chargebacks from those who are using, or else they have to go out and seek out VC funding. But imagine if they paid for their power by those who are actually generating the requests on a basis. And instead of you having to go out and pay every time, you just give an allowance to your AI agent or to your AI service, and they transact whatever you're requesting. And it's automatic, immediate settlement. And I think this is really a direction that more and more of us will start using these AI tools because they really do save time, energy, effort, and allow us to become much more efficient and save our time, which is the most valuable resource. ID verification is another aspect that I see the blockchain, the private public key technology really having a lot of potential. And this will become more and more important as we see more deep fakes and more AI generated voice and video. I'm being videoed right now, but somebody can take a small snippet of my voice, my image, and create whatever they want. So, how do you know if it's really me or if it's a fake me? ID verification using public and private key technology. So these are some of the things that I think are really exciting to think about beyond Bitcoin as what we know and love, but also the technology that can, really enable enormous innovation. So challenges right now. I mean, it's always challenging when you're a startup to raise funding, and it is hard to raise money. Different funding environments. The last couple of years have been especially brutal for startups, unless you're an AI company. But when you're talking about Bitcoin startups, I mean, just think of it, the entire universe of people who really understand Bitcoin and then understand Bitcoin as a technology is small. And you also don't have a lot of talent. It's hard to find talent in terms of programmers, even sales, designers who understand the Bitcoin ethos and you can hire and bring onto your team. So startups have to have I think I want to encourage more startup development on Bitcoin technologies because it's now proven to be that this is the most stable of all blockchains. So I want to hopefully drive innovation from some of these crypto companies and tokenized companies into the Bitcoin blockchain. And I think it takes all of us to help educate, what is possible, why Bitcoin is a better blockchain, time chain, I like to call it, and what the benefits are of innovating on this stable platform. So the platform risks are essentially removed. For funds raising, and there are only a handful of funds that are really specialized in Bitcoin. And these include like 1031, Trammell, who I mentioned, Stillmark, Elise Killen, Ego Death Capital, Fulgar. So there's a handful of funds that are really specialized in supporting these Bitcoin startups, but they have their own unique challenges. When they go out to raise funding, the VC reputation is not so great among a lot of Bitcoiners. And I think that's because there's been this trend toward tokenization in traditional VC, where for the cryptos, they issue tokens, they pre mine, they give them out, and the early adopters get exit liquidity or get their funding back plus profits. And then the rest of the investors, quote unquote, get left in the dust. So that's created a bad ethos and investment perspective for these sorts of companies. So by having this group of companies like Stillmark, I hear Elise always talk about the long-term view, really supporting the startups with knowledge, with introductions, with guidance on how to guide your company. These are the sorts of companies that you want to have. I hear Jeff Booth talk about contributing and helping build the world you want to see become a reality. And these are the sorts of long term viewpoints that I think are so important that we lost in traditional VC to a large extent, and we need to get back to. It's kind of a time preference matter. So instead of being high time preference where you need to cash out really quickly, I think that's driven by the large amount of money that went into VC funding, and get back to what VC originally was 10-year time frame, really supporting the companies and helping them build from a strategic level. It's hard for these VCs though to find limited partners or the investors in their funds because so few people understand Bitcoin or understand Bitcoin as a technology. So these are the challenges that the funds have. So I think that what we need to do is kind of reframe where Bitcoin startups, how they can make their money. And this goes back to some of the big ideas that I talked about a little bit before. Micropayments provide Bitcoin companies with opportunities that they may not have had before. So if you can monetize internally, I always think for a startup, that's the best way. If you don't have to take outside funding and give up a percentage of your ownership, if you can do it internally, that's the ideal. Micropayments might provide a way, instead of requesting a lot of investment funds or subscriptions, If you can pay on a per use basis, that actually helps you validate your idea, because if you're getting paid for it in micropayments or whatever, there's value that people are finding in your product. Will help your cash flow, and it might help you get to profitability in a faster level. It's foundational tech. So if you think about the early days of the internet, it's like those hardware, software, the original backbones of the internet are where the big money was made. And so I think by being foundational technology and presenting yourself as such to investors, this is a way of really, we just have to help educate what is the difference between Bitcoin technology, private public key, the cryptography, the stability, the blockchain, to help tell this story a little bit more effectively. I think also Bitcoin companies will naturally want to hold Bitcoin. So on their balance sheet, this is a whole different phenomena that we've never seen before. But if you have a Bitcoin company that has cash assets or has financial assets, and part of those are in Bitcoin, other than in the last 10 minutes, generally goes up. So, you can, if you're an investor in it on a long term perspective, and the Bitcoin company that you've invested in has Bitcoin on the balance sheet, then you have an opportunity to actually gain not only in the growth of the business, but also in the growth of the financial assets of that business too. So that's a potential that I think we need to think about and be more open minded to. So, what are our next steps? Our next steps are, I want to encourage everybody to think a little bit more about how you can support building with Bitcoin. I think if you have the capacity to be an angel investor, there are some great platforms, including Lightning Ventures, that allows you to invest in Bitcoin companies at $1,000 up. I think there are ways to become introduced to some of these Bitcoin companies and become an investor in them. Probably a lot of them are here in this conference today. If you don't have the stomach for trying to figure out the tech yourself, or understand how to invest in an individual company, then you can support the venture funds that are investing in these companies. And this is a great way of becoming a limited partner. A lot of them raise on a continual basis. Happy to give you names of the funds, and this way you have a better way of having somebody else who might be an expert in how to structure a deal or how to evaluate what the progress of that deal is, while you can enjoy the technology and the growth of the technology. And then the other way is to start a Bitcoin company yourself. If you have a problem, if you thought of something that needs to be solved, see if you can't start a company and do it. That's the hardest one, by the way. I think it's much easier to invest in a company than to start a company. But there are great people all around, and developers and founders. So that might be a way to contribute to building with Bitcoin. But I just, in closing, I want to really encourage us all to be thinking that if we really want Bitcoin to succeed, we have to support adoption. And I think the last panel even talked about, do you get involved with going and supporting regulatory advancement on mining? And throughout the day, we've talked about how to further our Bitcoin progress. And I think building with Bitcoin is one concept that is not yet talked enough about. But any of these builders, all these people, when you go through the next break and you see the startups sitting at the tables, shake their hands, congratulate them, tell them how much you appreciate them building with Bitcoin, because I think they're doing the hard work for all of us, whether it's mining, wallets, games, back end support. These are all our heroes that we need to celebrate and support. I also want to just let you know that one future source of this is Israel. Right here is my co host, and he and I are starting a podcast. It'll be launching next week, called Build with Bitcoin. And we'll be telling the stories about the entrepreneurs that are building on Bitcoin, and also the investors that are supporting them. So we'd love for you to give us a listen, and that might help you identify some of the companies that you can support, or the investors that you can support, or at least learn a little bit more about how this technology has the power to change everything that we do. I mean, I really love thinking about it, and I encourage you to open your mind up and be curious about how this special type of technology that's distributed, that it gets rid of the middlemen, that opens up our, I loved what Tip and Z said earlier this morning. we don't need to trust anymore because now we have proof. And so I think I'll close with that because it's such an awesome line. So thank you so much for your time and attention. I really appreciate it and would like to open it up for any questions. Sure. And this light is really bright. So if somebody can help me identify if there are hands up because I cannot see a thing. Is that Pierre? Oh, sorry. Anyway, the question is, what do I think of grassroots capital versus equity crowdfunding, which is kind of grassroots capital. So equity crowdfunding, which is basically where small amounts support the business instead of the professional investors. I love that idea. I mean, I actually think, I mean, there are some restrictions in the way, and this really chaffs me sometimes, but it's like the regulatory landscape in the U.S. prohibits a lot of people from investing in, unless you're a qualified investor, unless you meet certain financial landmarks. They don't want you to invest in venture capital because or direct with companies because they think it's too risky. Crowdfunding allows you to do that. So you're combining with other people. There still are benchmarks that you're supposed to meet. Some of them can be intellectual capital. So if you can prove that you're in the industry or you know the subject domain, then you can bypass the financial regulations. But in theory, I love it. And I think, especially as Bitcoiners, we're the natural people who understand this technology. We're the ones who can support it best and should support it best. And often, I mean, this doesn't happen necessarily if you have a tiny investment, a crowdfunded investment with a company. But if you're a larger investor with the company, you should get involved in helping that company along in whatever area they might be deficient. So they might know the tech stack really well, but they may not know how to communicate their product, or they might know the tech stock very well, but they need help on the legal or regulatory landscape. And if you can help them or advise them, that's a great way. But I mean, I love that. I mean, I really prefer that. And I think even the VCs that are specialized in this space, like 1031, I heard Grant talk at an event in Austin a couple weeks ago, and I think he doesn't like the term VC. I mean, he really prefers to be more of a strategic investor. I can't remember the term he used, but the ethos is exactly what drove me. I closed my fund in December of last year, my venture fund, which was early stage tech, to focus more fully on Bitcoin and supporting Bitcoin companies. And I don't know what form that takes, but I think that it's absolutely correct that it should be ground up, just as Bitcoin was ground up. Other questions? Yes, and Geyser Fund, and I should throw that out too, because not all of the companies right now are built as for-profit companies. A lot of them are projects or they're nonprofits, and so Geyser Fund is an outstanding way to help support those, and Open Sats as well. So I think we'll see more and more. I mean, here's another idea. It's like help find ways or open up more funds that crowdfund and that bring more capabilities for people to invest small amounts, get their feet wet in investing, and support these Bitcoin companies. So I think all of these are great ideas. And I mean, the thing I love, well, many things I love about Bitcoin, but one of the things I love most is that it started from the plebs, from the people, and it's only now getting into the institutions when we're, at what, over 90% issued. So we really have a leg up on this, and I think the same thing will happen with supporting Bitcoin companies. So I just feel that this is a great opportunity for us to be truly invested in the full sense of the word in both Bitcoin, the digital asset, as well as Bitcoin, the foundational financial technology that I think is changing the world and will change so many aspects of it too, beyond financial, to these other aspects through the micropayments and different aspects of it too. Other questions? I think I'm early. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I really appreciate it.